Hey, welcome to the Spector Creative channel. I'm Scott Toy Guru Neitluch, and that's me at Mattel in one of my more celebratory days because, well, working at Mattel was awesome. I'm a collector like yourself, and getting to work on DC action figures and Ghostbuster action figures and, gosh, Voltron and Back to the Future, and not to forget the creme de la creme crown jewel Masters of the Universe classics was an absolute dream come true as a toy collector, as a business person, as a fan. And one of the more bittersweet lines that I worked on was the DC Universe Infinite Heroes line, which was the 3 3/4, 4-inch, etc., kind of the G.I. Joe, Star Wars, sort of, Marvel Universe scale for DC. And bittersweet because when I came onto the brand, I was a senior brand analyst was my title. It was right when I moved to marketing, so I wasn't in charge of the brand. I kind of sat on the sidelines and gave a little advice, but it wasn't something I had direct say in. Versus DC 6-inch, the DC Universe Classics, I did work on directly, starting with Wave 2. So why was this line created? Well, it was created to fill out a planogram because you need a certain amount of SKUs in order to get square footage at retail, and just having the 6-inch figures wasn't enough to get the 3 feet that DC Universe wanted. And it made sense when expanding DC Universe, or rather the DC license, that 3 3/4 was a good scale to sort of double down on. It was an existing scale, and it would allow us to do a larger amount of characters in a shorter amount of time compared to 6-inch due to the limited articulation. Eventually, I did take over this line towards the very end, and we started getting some really cool items, including the biggest DC item of all time, which was a giant 3-foot, 4-foot Anti-Monitor figure, which we'll get to. But it was a long way to go from there. And I want to talk about a little bit of the history of the brand and the ups and downs, because it had, well, a lot of bumps along the road. So the Infinite Heroes line Crisis series didn't start out as this at all. And it started out as a line that was not going to have Batman and Superman in it, because Mattel had just gotten the master license to DC, and the previous team, or rather the team that started off on Infinite Heroes that was brand managing DC Superheroes, this was before I came into marketing, well, they had been working on Superman and Batman toys for years, and getting the master license was like the chains finally came off, and they could now finally have access to all these other characters that they'd wanted to do for years. So the decision was made to have Infinite Heroes be a line without Batman and Superman, because they wanted to celebrate the master license. It was like getting a new sandbox to play in that had so many more toys in it. And that was sort of the overall creative thought was, let's do a DC line without Superman and Batman in it. And this was me as the senior brand analyst and also a DC fan sitting there going, okay, well, there are a lot of cool characters, and let's not include the 2 best-selling ones, but hey, awesome. So the line went forward with kind of a lot of B and D list characters out the gate, if you will. I think having Captain Marvel was one of the more well-known heroes in the launch wave. And there was also a deliberate decision to do army building characters, because at this scale it was felt it could differentiate from 6-inch by including characters that fans could army build. Your stormtroopers, in this case your Gotham City Police Department. And throwing in characters like Jim Gordon in order to lead them, sort of like the general with his army, if you will. This was all deliberate to make it stand out and be different from the 6-inch line, both the DC Superheroes and now the DC Universe Classics line. So you had things like 3-packs and singles with Gotham City SWAT, and you had singles that had more B and C-list characters, like even variants of the Atom. And then we had 2-packs where we would double down on, Flash and Reverse Flash. There were very few tools in the beginning, and they really had to be maximized with strategic repaints in order to fill out all the SKUs, like this Green Lantern 6-pack that used Battle Damage, Manhunters, and a clear Hal Jordan, which could pair up with single-carded figures like Sinestro. So with the few tools that were available for launch, a lot of sort of very clever, or rather, outside the box solutions were come up with in order to fill out all of the SKUs. And again, the army builder concept was really pushed because it was felt that this was something that would really make the line stand out as the first DC line that really had not just your generals, but all of his, his pawns as well, or his, infantrymen. So, you have Hawkman and two Thanagarian warriors. So, et cetera, et cetera. Eventually, we did get to Superman and Batman. And, part of this was when I took over the brand in year 2 and pushed to kind of try to get them back in. I'm not trying to take credit for everything, but it was something that when the line did fall under my jurisdiction, I really pushed to bring Batman and Superman into the line because, they're the most popular characters with kids. All right, so why theme it Crisis on Infinite Earths? Well, very good question, and that was not the original plan at all.
Not a great plan.
The original plan was this was going to be a Jim Lee line. It was going to be based on Jim Lee's artwork. It was going to have his artwork on the packaging, and it was going to be tied into the DC Online video game, which was launching at about the same time. Jim Lee designed a lot of the characters for this video game launch or online game launch. And the idea was we were going to use all of his designs, his name, his artwork, and in fact, we were even going to have his signature on package. I mean, not, he wasn't going to hand sign them, but it would have been like a facsimile, I can speak, of his signature on the package to show that he, this was based on his work. Well, that was going along great, and literally at like the 0 hour, this got changed for a ton of reasons. I think the game got pushed out, and there were legal issues with the Jim Lee art, so we had to pull all of that and change it at the last minute. But you will note that some of the characters that were more generic looking, like Black Adam here, still kept the Jim Lee look, because the Jim Lee design for the video game was still considered close to the traditional look. Same thing with like Catwoman as an example. The Jim Lee design for DC Universe Online was considered still close to the classic version of the character, so it was okay for us to keep that design and that sculpt, which was already in progress, for the Catwoman figure. But other designs, like what we were doing with a lot of the troopers, a lot of the army building, like these LexCorp troopers designed by Jim Lee, these we had to nix because the design was considered too original to the game. It wasn't, just the classic version of the character the way Catwoman or Black Adam was. So we had all these figure designs and even sculpts underway that were based on the army builders in the DC Universe Online game that had to be changed like really quickly. And that's why we wound up with things like this, where Lex Luthor and the LexCorp troopers, they had to basically look more classic, and they couldn't look like the game look that was originally planned. So all Jim Lee kind of stylistic elements had to be removed, and only the Jim Lee designs that were still true to a classic look could be kept. So yeah, a lot of stuff had to get tossed, and there were so many cool designs that were part of the Jim Lee concept and the Jim Lee vision for the online game that were really supposed to, that was what was going to carry the line. But hey, plans had to be changed at the last minute because they did, and that's part of what happens in the toy industry. But when change does happen at the last minute, it can throw things off the tracks, similar to like the Attack of the Clones 3D line from Hasbro, when that changed when Disney bought Star Wars. So the Infinite Crisis theme was basically something that we came up with at the last minute to replace the Jim Lee DC Universe Online theme. And to try to emphasize this a little more, we made a deliberate attempt to get characters into the line from the Crisis story. And that's why sort of the second and third wave, you see a lot of these characters showing up, because now that we weren't connected to the Jim Lee line look, we could do some fun creative stuff with the Crisis theme, like this great battle-damaged Supergirl being held in the famous pose, the Michelangelo statue pose there from the cover. And of course doing things like the Monitor and all these characters, Harbinger, that were specific to the storyline. And of course, we also tried to do classic versions of the characters too, and keep that going as well, knowing that they're sort of the best-selling characters, and wanting characters that appeal to kids and collectors alike. One character that wound up in the launch was the Question, and I'm sitting there on the sidelines as a junior senior brand analysis. I forgot what my original title was before I became a marketing manager. And when I saw that the Question was being put in the line, I was like, oh, we are in for it now, because the Justice League fans have been waiting years to get the Question. And if he comes out first in the Infinite Heroes line before he's in JLU, we are going to wind up with such pie on our faces, because the Question had a huge role in the Justice League Unlimited series. He was more or less the star, and I really pushed to make sure we could get him out in JLU first, or at least at the same time, because I wanted to avoid having this figure that fans have been asking for years in JLU first show up in Infinite Heroes, and I was really proud we pulled that one off. So the line was set to go. It hit retail, and it did okay, but a lot of, because we had to eliminate a lot of characters that were planned for the launch because of the Jim Lee look and replace them, we had to come up with sort of other things to try to push the line, and one of those was the anti-monitor points that we had on the back. And we'll get into that, because there's a part 2 of this video where we're going to cover the anti-monitor points, our gigantic anti-monitor giveaway figure or raffle figure, as well as the finale for the line, which really did go out on a bang and a high point. It was a fun line to work with, but bittersweet because of, all of the logistical issues and the change in creative direction, and lots of cooks in the kitchen on this one, shall we say. But we did get to some really great gems, and we'll be covering that in part 2 coming out soon here on the Spector Creative channel. Thanks for watching. Let me know any thoughts or comments if I missed anything, and I can cover that in part 2. Comments always read and replied to. Share this video if you can, because it tells YouTube to share it with more people. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.